Maxwell has now begun a concerted campaign to rewrite history. And in an audacious and strangely compelling interview from prison, she's making some extraordinary claims.
In the cold silence of a federal prison cell, the story is being rewritten. 12 hours of sealed testimony, a carefully constructed image, and one coded nickname flower that now threatens to bring a carefully built empire crashing down. The worlds are closing in. Hello, everyone. This is the Royal Sentinel, and what I am about to share with you is a development that has sent absolute shockwaves, not just through Buckingham Palace, but through the corridors of power on both sides of the Atlantic. For years, the name Ghislaine Maxwell has been synonymous with a dark chapter of elite society, a story sealed away behind prison walls and redacted court documents. But just hours ago, information surfaced indicating that the silence has been broken. From within the Federal Correctional Institution in Tallahassee, Maxwell is reportedly beginning a concerted campaign to rewrite history, and the tremors are being felt most acutely in Montecito, California. According to sources connected to her legal team, this is not a desperate plea for sympathy. It is a calculated deployment of information, a strategic move in a game of attrition that has just entered a terrifying new phase. The central explosive claim revolves around 12 hours of sealed, previously undisclosed interview recordings. Let that sink in. These are not just any interviews. Insiders describe them as the Rosetta Stone of the entire Epstein network, containing names, dates, and connections that were deliberately scrubbed from the public record in a methodical dismantling of the truth. Within this allegedly missing testimony, a name has surfaced that the royal family has spent years trying to contain: Rachel Meghan Markle. The allegation is not a vague association, but a specific, detailed account of her alleged presence within the elite social ecosystems that Maxwell and Epstein cultivated with cold precision. This development has triggered what can only be described as a state of emergency within the Sussex camp. The carefully constructed narrative of a fairy tale romance and a brave escape from institutional cruelty is now facing a catastrophic threat from a past that refuses to stay buried. Consider the implications. This is not about tabloid thunder. It is about the potential unraveling of a multi-million-dollar brand built on a foundation that is now beginning to crack under the weight of its own alleged contradictions. Every public appearance, every podcast, every carefully worded statement about authenticity and speaking one's truth is now cast in a chilling new light. The very source of their privilege, the narrative of victimhood they have commercialized so effectively, is threatened by a voice from a prison cell. This represents a fundamental restructuring of the power dynamics. The hunters have become the hunted. The atmosphere inside the Sussex residence reportedly resembles a siege, a desperate sprint against time to formulate a counter-offensive against an enemy they thought was permanently neutralized. We were told the story was over. We were wrong. The worlds are closing in. To understand the gravity of the Maxwell revelations, one must first understand the weapon used to conceal them, the redaction. In the theater of law and public perception, the black bar of a redacted document is not a sign of missing information. It is a declaration of power. It is a statement that certain truths are too dangerous for public consumption, a tool of institutional management designed to control a narrative. According to legal analysts who have reviewed the Epstein case files, the censorship was unprecedented in its scope and surgical in its execution. What I have before me are reports from court insiders who describe a methodical dismantling of the truth, a process governed not by due process, but by the imperative to protect a network of powerful facilitators. Entire pages were blacked out, key witness names were excised, financial trails leading to prominent figures, philanthropic organizations, and political campaigns were severed with chilling precision. This was not the standard legal practice of protecting victims. This was, according to one source connected to the prosecution, a strategic narrative blackout. Its purpose was to isolate the crimes to Epstein and Maxwell, severing their connections to the wider ecosystem of power that enabled them The missing 12 hours of Maxwell's testimony are the crown jewel of this alleged cover-up. These recordings were reportedly made during preliminary depositions before legal teams had fully sanitized her narrative for trial. A source familiar with the proceedings whispered that these tapes contained Maxwell's unvarnished, unfiltered recollections of who was present at specific events, what their roles were, and how they were brought into the fold. The fact that these specific recordings have been so deeply buried, classified under seals, typically reserved for matters of national security, speaks volumes. It suggests they contain information that goes far beyond the crimes for which she was convicted, pointing toward a wider conspiracy of influence peddling, social engineering, and potentially blackmail. The allegation that Meghan Markle's name appears within this sealed archive transforms her personal history from a tabloid curiosity into a matter of institutional security for the Crown. The black bars are no longer just hiding Maxwell's secrets. They are now a fortress around the Sussex brand. But every fortress has a weakness, and from her prison cell, Ghislaine Maxwell has just located the fault line. The worlds are closing in on Rachel, Meghan Markle, because I've been doing more and more digging into the alleged Maxwell testimony, and the findings are shocking. According to high-level sources with knowledge of the suppressed interviews, Maxwell did not just mention Meghan by name. She allegedly referred to her using a specific coded designation, flower. To the uninformed observer, this might seem like a harmless, even complimentary nickname. But within the quasi-corporate structure of the Epstein-Maxwell operation, language was a weapon. Nothing was accidental. Every word, every label was part of a predetermined legal framework of control and classification. Insiders claim that such nicknames were part of a sophisticated system used to denote an individual's role, status, and potential utility within their sprawling elite social network. The designation flower, according to one analyst who has studied the organization's methods of psychological manipulation, was reportedly reserved for individuals who possessed a unique and valuable combination of assets: marketable beauty, unchecked ambition, and a carefully maintained appearance of innocence that made them particularly effective at navigating high-status gatherings without raising alarm. They were, in essence, social assets. Their purpose was to open doors, build bridges to new circles of power, and lend an air of legitimacy to otherwise questionable environments. They were the public-facing, acceptable part of a deeply compromised enterprise. Supporters of this theory argue that this designation fits the pattern of Meghan's meteoric rise with chilling precision. It reframes her entire journey not as a story of chance, romance, or personal achievement, but as the successful deployment of a carefully cultivated asset. This allegation shatters the approved version of her story, the multi-million-dollar narrative sold to Netflix and Spotify. It suggests her presence in exclusive rooms, from the private clubs of London to the philanthropic galas of New York, was not an accident, but an assignment. The term flower ceases to be a compliment and becomes what it allegedly was all along: a professional designation, a job title, in a world of profound dysfunction and profound deception. The timeline aligns perfectly. Her silence on these matters speaks volumes. But it gets worse. The Maxwell connection does not exist in a vacuum. It aligns perfectly with another, previously unexplained chapter in this sordid affair: the legal gambit involving Virginia Giuffre and Prince Andrew. It is a matter of public record that Giuffre's legal team pursued a civil case against the Duke of York with relentless determination. What is not widely known, however, is a critical piece of information that has been deliberately kept out of the mainstream narrative. According to sources connected to the Crown's legal representatives, for a time, Giuffre's lawyers viewed Meghan Markle as a potential corroborating witness. Let that sink in. This was not based on a wild guess or a tabloid rumor. It was based on information gathered during their own investigation, suggesting that Meghan's timeline and social circles in the years prior to meeting Harry may have overlapped with key figures in the Epstein network. The potential of her testimony even as a peripheral witness, represented a catastrophic threat to the monarchy. It was a threat to constitutional stability, risking a direct link between the California branch and the institution's most toxic and damaging scandal. It was an unthinkable outcome. Then, just as the discovery phase of the lawsuit threatened to compel sworn testimony from high-profile individuals, the case was abruptly settled for a reported £12 million. This was not a simple legal decision to avoid embarrassment. It was an act of profound institutional self-preservation. It was a financial siege, a commercial termination notice for a legal proceeding that threatened to bring the entire house of cards down. The settlement, executed with surgical precision, effectively slammed the door on any possibility of Meghan Markle being deposed under oath. In the eyes of critics and legal analysts, this was a masterful exercise of soft power, a move that conveniently shielded not only Prince Andrew, but potentially a host of other influential individuals whose names might have surfaced under oath. It was an expensive but brutally necessary component of the containment strategy, preventing the formal inquiry that the palace feared most. Long before Meghan Markle became a household name, another woman allegedly understood the threat she represented, Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York. Insiders from the old royal social circuit paint a picture of Fergie not as the flighty, scandal-prone character portrayed in the media, but as a shrewd and calculating networker, a quiet gatekeeper who knew every player, every risk, and every secret within London's elite social spaces. Years later, Fergie publicly claimed, with a carefully crafted air of surprise, that she had never met Meghan until after her relationship with Prince Harry began. Among those familiar with that world, the claim was met with derision and disbelief. They argue that if Meghan was moving even on the periphery of the circles that included Prince Andrew, Jeffrey Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell, Fergie would have known. Her social radar was and is legendary. Nothing, they insist, slipped past her watchful eye. Here's the part no one expected. One source, a former courtier with decades of experience, put it bluntly: Fergie allegedly engaged in a subtle but firm campaign of social body blocking. This was not about personal dislike. It was about institutional risk management. She is said to have expertly redirected conversations, managed introductions with the precision of a chess master, and quietly ensured that no meaningful connection was ever established between Meghan and Prince Andrew. It was a form of preemptive institutional defense, a quiet, undeclared war to prevent a scandal before it could ignite. Fergie, having witnessed the catastrophic damage of the Epstein Association firsthand, was reportedly on high alert. This narrative reframes her role entirely. She was not an oblivious bystander enjoying the perks of her past life. She was a shield, a silent guardian of the monarchy's fragile reputation, attempting to keep a firm boundary in place while a known liability hovered at the gates. She recognized the ambition, the social circles, and the catastrophic risks Meghan represented long before anyone else. And in the silent, unspoken world of royal power plays, she acted. To comprehend the scale of the threat Fergie was attempting to manage, we must roll the tape backward to the year 2000, to the manicured lawns of Ascot. This was the moment the Epstein-Maxwell network executed its most audacious and symbolically devastating move, the infiltration of the royal box. This was not merely a social visit for a well-connected financier. According to palace insiders who were present that day, Prince Andrew himself facilitated the access, treating Jeffrey Epstein not as a guest, but as an esteemed colleague, an equal. Picture the gravity of such a moment. The royal box is the inner sanctum of the British establishment, a physical manifestation of the monarchy's power and prestige. It is a symbol of ultimate trust and approval. Epstein's presence there, mingling freely with the highest echelons of society, was a strategic victory of unimaginable proportions. It was the moment the network secured its most valuable asset, royal validation. Ghislaine Maxwell, ever the loyal lieutenant, worked the crowd with practiced ease, her movements a masterclass in social navigation. Sarah Ferguson lingered nearby, still influential. This was the height of the Andrew Epstein friendship, a period defined by private travel, discreet dinners, and gatherings far from the prying eyes of the public. These were not casual meetups. They were tightly controlled environments where status was the primary currency and discretion was paramount. Epstein's acceptance into this world was not accidental. It was a hostile acquisition of trust, a methodical dismantling of royal protocol that allowed a predator to position himself at the very heart of the institution. This was the foundational breach, the original sin from which all subsequent scandals, including the current crisis engulfing the Sussex enterprise, would eventually grow. The infiltration of Ascot was not just a photo opportunity. It was the beachhead from which the network launched its operations into the heart of the establishment. It was a clear and chilling message. We are inside the walls. And from that point on, the institution was compromised, living on borrowed time. In April 2015, Prince Harry was the guest of honor at the grand opening of Soho House in Istanbul. This was not just another party. It was a meticulously curated event, a nexus of wealth, celebrity, and influence, where futures were forged and destinies redirected. And among the carefully selected attendees was Meghan Markle. Insiders now view this moment not as a chance encounter, but as the culmination of a years-long strategic positioning campaign. The moment an asset was finally put into play, Soho House is more than a club. It is a high-speed global network. Guest lists, seating charts, and introductions are engineered with the precision of a military operation to create opportunities. For Meghan, who was already deeply embedded in the Soho ecosystem through a sophisticated web of stylists, producers, and influencers, the Istanbul event was the perfect stage. Her meeting with Harry was, according to observers who were in the room, an orchestrated moment. This was planned. It marked the formal launch of her ascent from a cable television actress to a global figure of immense influence. The speed of her transformation following this event was breathtaking and, to many, deeply suspicious. Invitations to exclusive humanitarian circles multiplied. Her proximity to power became focused and sharp. As one jaded industry insider later noted with a cynical laugh, she didn't stumble into that world. She was guided straight through the front door. This raises the critical question that the palace has steadfastly refused to address. Who shaped that introduction? Who decided that Meghan Markle should be in that specific room at that exact moment? The Istanbul nexus suggests her entry into royal life was not a fairy tale born of serendipity. It was a transaction. It was the result of careful, long-term planning within a clandestine system that moves its chosen players across the board with cold, calculating precision. The love story was the cover story. The reality was a hostile acquisition, and the target was the heart of the British monarchy. Following the Istanbul meeting, Meghan Markle's public image underwent a fundamental restructuring. Almost overnight, she was repositioned as a major voice in global humanitarianism, a transition that, for many insiders, was too smooth and too rapid to be organic. The controversy deepened when Maxwell's alleged testimony resurfaced, which included the absolutely explosive claims that vast sums of Jeffrey Epstein's money were funneled into major global philanthropic initiatives, including some with direct links to Clinton-aligned organizations. These claims, while contested, provide a chilling and essential context for Meghan's sudden rise. If questionable wealth was circulating through respected charitable channels, then influence, access, and introductions may have traveled alongside it. In this world, philanthropy is not simply charity, it is a currency. It is a powerful, sanitized facade that allows controversial figures to purchase legitimacy, launder their reputations, and place their associates in key positions of influence. Against this backdrop, Meghan's swift entry into elite political and humanitarian spaces seems less like ambition and more like activation. Doors that are sealed to others swung open. Platforms were provided. This pattern aligns perfectly with her inexplicable appearance at a Q&A session in Ukraine in 2014, long before her royal association, engaging in spaces typically reserved for seasoned political operatives and high-level NGO directors. It suggests the groundwork for her public image had been laid long before the love story began. Her humanitarian work was not the cause of her fame. It was the vehicle for her ascent, a carefully constructed narrative designed to obscure a more complex and troubling origin story. It was the commercial and social termination of her old identity and the birth of a new, more marketable one. It was a masterful exercise in strategic narrative placement, designed to build a public persona so unimpeachable that to question it would seem absurd. But the questions are now being asked. The unease surrounding Meghan Markle's past and her rapid integration into the royal family allegedly ran deepest with one man, the Prince of Wales. As the future king, Prince William is viewed by all as the ultimate guardian of the monarchy's survival. Sources close to the prince describe him as deeply and fundamentally cautious of anything that could reopen the wounds of the Epstein scandal. Long before the public disagreements in the Oprah special, William reportedly held a hard line, firmly opposing any scenario that involved a permanent, working return of Harry and Meghan to the royal fold. To him, this was never about personal dislike or sibling rivalry. This was about institutional survival. It was a calculated legal concern, an act of strategic risk mitigation to protect the crown from what he perceived as an unacceptable and catastrophic liability. One story, repeated by senior court officials, illustrates his cold precision. At a tense family gathering at Balmoral, Prince Andrew sought a more visible public role at an upcoming church event. William is said to have presented his father, now King Charles III, with a blunt and non-negotiable choice. Andrew's presence or his own? Andrew withdrew. This was not an act of pride. It was the implementation of a mandate. It was driven by William's core understanding that any connection, however indirect or unproven, to the Maxwell Epstein world represented an existential threat to the throne. Seen through this lens, his current unyielding stance is not family drama. It is the construction of an institutional firewall. He is not guarding his ego. He is guarding the long-term stability of the institution he is destined to lead. He is refusing to reintroduce a figure he believes is a magnet for the very controversies that could bring the entire ancient structure crumbling down from within. This is institutional management, not parental displeasure, and the future king has made his decision. However, this merely scratches the surface. The most intriguing piece of this entire puzzle unfolds not in a palace or a courtroom, but on the azure waters of the Mediterranean. Years before Meghan Markle was famous, before she was even a recognizable name outside of casting director circles, she was allegedly a guest on a luxury yacht that old socialites describe as a strange and powerful crossroads. This was not a vacation. This was a floating salon, a discreet mobile headquarters where billionaire power brokers, political operatives, and ambitious newcomers mingled freely under the warm sun. Deals were struck, futures were reshaped, and lives were quietly redirected in the space of a single evening. According to these accounts, this yacht was a critical nexus point, a place where individuals were vetted, assessed, and if deemed suitable, placed on a new trajectory. Whether Meghan was invited by design, placed there deliberately, or simply arrived by chance, remains a point of fierce contention. What is clear, according to those who claim to have been there, is that this event was not an end point. It was a beginning. Sources claim that from that moment forward, her path allegedly widened. The doors to exclusive New York gatherings, shadowy London networks, and lavish events in Istanbul began to open with startling ease. This single event is presented as the moment she was identified and elevated, the start of a carefully managed journey that would eventually lead her into the life of a prince who may never have understood the full picture. The yacht was the launch pad. It was the point where potential was converted into a strategic asset, setting in motion the entire chain of events that now threatens to destabilize the House of Windsor. The mysterious 12 hours of Maxwell's testimony are said to contain the names, dates, and connections that map this journey from anonymity to influence with forensic precision. Years before Jeffrey Epstein became a global scandal, the first warning signs of his criminal enterprise were already flashing in Palm Beach, Florida. In 2001, local police began examining disturbing reports connected not directly to Epstein, but to his chief operator, Ghislaine Maxwell. According to a later and largely ignored Department of Justice report, Maxwell was actively recruiting young, beautiful college students for vaguely defined office work at Epstein's residence, offering a staggering $200 per day for basic administrative tasks. The students reported that Maxwell kept their duties deliberately vague and that phone calls felt abnormal, with men coordinating the arrival of specific girls in a manner that resembled appointments more than employment. At least 2 women went further, reporting inappropriate touching by Epstein that made them feel violated. Police searched trash taken from the residence and found materials that deepened their concerns. Handwritten lists of women with their ages and physical descriptions, massage advertisements, and business records. Despite this, in April 2002, Palm Beach police closed the case, issuing the blunt and chilling conclusion that they had not detected a crime that could be charged at that time. This was the first in a long and sordid series of institutional failures and controversial legal decisions, culminating in the highly criticized 2007 non-prosecution agreement that allowed Epstein to avoid serious federal charges. This history of missed opportunities and shockingly lenient treatment reads less like incompetence and more like a conspiracy of silence. It established a dangerous precedent that would echo for decades, that for certain powerful individuals, the law was not a contract but a suggestion. This early, forgotten investigation was the preamble to a global scandal, a clear signal that the network was operating with a sense of impunity that would allow it to flourish unchecked for nearly 2 more decades. It was a substantial breach of duty by the authorities, and it was only the beginning. As Meghan Markle entered royal life, a shield of unseen protection surrounded her, a phenomenon that puzzled even the most seasoned palace watchers. The prevailing theory among these elite observers is not that Meghan herself is being protected, but that the influential figures who allegedly engineered her path are the ones being shielded from scrutiny. In this chilling narrative, Meghan is portrayed as someone who knows too much. Her rapid rise, her instant global image, and the powerful, unexpected allies who continue to defend her are explained as sophisticated measures to ensure her silence. This silence is her value, but it is also her power. And within the rigid confines of the royal family, it makes her a profound liability. She is a walking, breathing, sealed document. If compelled to testify, she could reveal not just personal experiences, but a roster of names far more powerful and influential than her own. This transforms the entire conflict from a family dispute into a high-stakes intelligence operation. The much-discussed California risk is no longer just a legal term referring to community property statutes in a potential divorce. It is a strategic designation for the catastrophic risk of a key witness in a global scandal being deposed under oath. This is why Prince William's firewall is so absolute and unforgiving. He is not merely managing a rogue family member engaged in petty vengeance. He is attempting to contain a security threat whose potential testimony could shatter the carefully preserved image of the monarchy and its powerful associates. This is a terrifying predicament. She is both a protected asset to the system that allegedly created her and, simultaneously, its single greatest liability. The secrets she holds, if they exist, are not evidence of a mistake, but of a system designed to lift and protect its own. And that system will defend itself at any cost. The fairy tale that Meghan Markle presented to the world already contained fractures. But the potential revelations from Ghislaine Maxwell's sealed testimony, a secret past allegedly involving coded designations, powerful networks, and orchestrated encounters, shatters it completely. The conflict has reached its inevitable conclusion, teaching a brutal but necessary lesson about power and legacy. One cannot build a global brand on a foundation of alleged deception and then act surprised when the past comes to collect its debt. The American dream is transforming into a financial nightmare, fueled by a liquidity crisis of credibility from which there is no escape. The 12 hours of missing interviews hang over Montecito like a guillotine. Maxwell's decision to speak is the spark, the first tremor of an earthquake that threatens to bring down the entire Sussex enterprise. And somewhere in California at this moment, Meghan Markle knows this is approaching. This represents the experience of someone waiting for a carefully constructed world to be methodically dismantled, piece by piece, by the very forces that allegedly created it. Now, the judgment passes to the jury of public opinion. Is this an act of petty vengeance from a convicted criminal? Or is it the first chapter of a reckoning that could expose a system of profound and disturbing influence that reaches into the highest levels of society? Cast your vote in the comments below. Do you believe the Maxwell tapes hold the key to understanding this saga? Or is this simply the final desperate act in a sordid drama? Type Team Reckoning if you believe the truth is about to be revealed, or type Team Narrative if you think this is nothing more than calculated manipulation. The siege is real, and the truth, whatever it may be, is coming.